Months is a long time in technology, especially in Silicon Valley. It's like a couple of centuries. 16 months ago, we had the very distinguished New York University journalism professor on our show, Meredith Broussard, to talk about race, gender, and ability bias in technology, particularly in terms of AI. Broussard is very well known as the author of two well-received books, Artificial Unintelligence, and her latest book, More Than a Glitch, Confronting Race, Gender, and Ability Bias in Tech. So 16 months later and more than 1,000 Keenon shows later as well, I thought we would revisit the great Broussard to talk what has happened over the last 16 months. Of course, much has happened. We've had many versions of GPT. We've got GPT-4, and we've had all the brouhaha over Sam Altman and the OpenAI board. And most recently, we've had the controversy over Sam Altman apparently appropriating Scarlett Johansson's AI voice. Meredith Broussard is joining us from New York. Meredith, what's happened over the last 16 months? Nice to see you again.
It's great to see you. Thank you so much for having me. It's really been a tumultuous 16 months. Everybody is talking about AI now. 16 months ago, we were on what felt like the precipice of the generative AI revolution. And it has turned out that the generative AI revolution is just kind of a letdown. It's a big,
Yeah, it's interesting. There was a piece on this, as I'm sure you saw, in the Wall Street Journal earlier this week about AI being overrated. New ChatGPT offers a lesson in AI hype. Is it all just the marketers now, Meredith? Is there nothing much there behind all the smoke and mirrors of the PR firms?
Well, one of the things that I noticed when I first started hearing about this generation of AI is I noticed that it was structurally similar to every other tech bubble that we've had. So the way the narrative
Mm.
goes is there's a new technology and there's some kind of white wonderkind who's behind it. And he says, oh, I wanted to invent something that I thought of watching science fiction when I was a kid, and this is it, and there's all this potential. And then, journalists get really excited. They're like, ooh, it's so much potential. And then the thing either doesn't work or doesn't work as expected, and then everybody's hopes get dashed again. So, whenever you hear that cycle repeating itself, it's really important to be cautious. AI is just math. It's very complicated, beautiful math. And math is really wonderful, but it is not the solution for absolutely everything in the world.
So it seems as if there are two kinds of critiques of developments in AI. The one you just offered, where a lot of it's hype, and then the one which suggests that it's undermining our humanity, our freedom, our ability to create, and of course, challenging many stereotypes when it comes to gender and sexuality and race. Can one simultaneously develop both critiques of AI?
I mean, I certainly think so. I think More Than a Glitch really dives into the various critiques of artificial intelligence. I think it's really important to start with what AI is and isn't, to have a really kind of comprehensive reality-based understanding of what's going on when we say AI. Then we need to look at the specific AI system that we're looking at, and we need to look at the context in which it's deployed. So facial recognition, for example, a kind of AI, is, to my mind, pretty harmless when it's used to unlock your phone. Because for me, it doesn't work half the time. It's not really a big deal. I just put in my passcode and I go on with my day. But then facial recognition used by police on real-time video surveillance feeds is much more harmful, right? That's a much worse context in which to use facial recognition, because facial recognition is worse at recognizing people with dark skin than people with light skin. It's better at recognizing men than women. Trans and non-binary folks are generally not recognized well at all. And so more people are going to get caught up inappropriately in the criminal justice system if police are using facial recognition. And so I would argue that that's a context where we should not be using AI at all.
You mentioned these cycles where some young, and you mentioned, I think, white entrepreneur gets idealized by the press. Altman, in this sense, Sam Altman, the CEO, or once the CEO, then got thrown out, now he's back, the CEO of OpenAI is the perfect example. Is there anything different from Altman, from a Zuckerberg in the past, or even a Bill Gates or a Steve Jobs?
I mean, to me, they seem kind of structurally similar. I don't know any of them personally.
But Altman has been, over the last 16 months since we've last talked, a figure of great controversy. The toxic culture claims resulted in him being pushed out. Is there something, I mean, he's a guy running a company worth many billions of dollars who seems to have some degree of control over our fate collectively. Should we be particularly concerned about some of the stories that have been coming out? There was one headline a few weeks ago suggesting that the fog around his ouster last year is beginning to clear. I'm not sure if you're following this story very carefully, but should we be concerned about all these boardroom shenanigans at OpenAI?
I mean, we absolutely should be concerned. Silicon Valley has had a very long-standing diversity problem. There are all kinds of harassment problems in Silicon Valley, and it's like absolutely yes, we should be concerned about working conditions in the companies that are making the technologies that we depend on. This is not new. Right? Silicon Valley has had these problems for a really long time. We can trace it back to toxic cultures inside math, physics, and computer science departments in academia. We can trace it back to women, people of color being excluded for years from elite mathematical circles. It's really nothing new. It is extremely important, and it is also nothing new. So one of the things that I do is algorithmic accountability reporting. So one of the traditional functions of the press has been to hold power accountable. And in a world where algorithms are increasingly being used to make decisions on our behalf, that accountability function has to transfer onto algorithms and their makers. So one of the core things we do in accountability reporting is we look at what people say, and then we look at what they do, right? And so if you are doing something that is different than what you are saying, well, there's likely a problem. So we can do this with tech firms. We can hold them accountable. We can say, all right, what kind of claims is OpenAI or Microsoft or Google or what have you making about their AI? And then how is that AI actually performing? So if you look at a recent investigation by Proof News, Julia Angwin's new investigative outfit, you can see that the big tech companies have made claims about generative AI and election information. They've pledged to put in guardrails so that generative AI will not spread misinformation about election-related topics. They've promised to actually send people to legitimate websites instead of generating wrong material, because generative AI generates stuff that's wrong all the time. And so Proof looked at these claims that the tech companies were making, and they said, all right, how are they measuring up? And what they found was that more than 50% of the time, the generative AI models, the 5 biggest ones, were generating inaccurate information around US elections.
Julia Angwin is an old friend. She's been on the show several times. You also, on your X page, you retweeted or re-X'd AI's gender disparity. Female researchers are vastly outnumbered at leading tech companies, especially OpenAI. OpenAI is bottom of a rather dismal league table. Microsoft, Amazon, Apple, Google, Meta, OpenAI. If this gender disparity gets addressed or got addressed, Meredith, would it change anything, or are there still the structural problems there? Whoever's doing the coding.
Well, it's about having people in the room, and then it's also about power. So when you really look closely at those figures, generally what has happened in the past is that tech companies have uh, more representation of women in marketing and HR functions. So if you look at the overall company, it looks like it's 30%, but you also have to think about where's the power inside a tech company. Well, the power is in the engineering department. And so if you break down the statistics more and you look at, okay, how many women are in engineering, how many women are in top management positions, the stats become even more dismal. So we need more diversity in the room where important decisions are being made. And we need those people to be empowered. We need everybody to listen because, if you're just the token minority in the room and nobody is taking you seriously, then your voice is not going to be heard.
Meredith, you've raised the alarm on this, and this has been known for many years. Why hasn't much changed, or has much changed? The numbers are dismal. OpenAI bottom of the league table at 18%. Has anything changed? Has anything improved over the last 5 years? Are there more female AI researchers or coders now in the business?
If big tech really wanted to move the needle on diversity, it would. We know how to create a more diverse workforce. We know how to fix leaky pipeline issues. We know that women start getting messages as early as third grade saying that boys are better at math and science, and girls should stick to reading and what have you. And I mean, these messages are dangerous. They have a really big impact. And when you hear them over and over and over again over the course of your life, it makes a difference. I mean, this is why we have concepts like the glass ceiling and the glass cliff, and these problems have not been eliminated. They should be, but they have not been.
I mean, if I'm a big tech CEO listening to this, I'm thinking to myself, well, maybe the problem is at places like NYU where you teach. I mean, they only get the kids coming out of the NYUs and the MITs and the Stanfords. So do institutions, top universities producing the kind of graduates who end up at Google or OpenAI, are they doing a good job? Is the problem there as well?
I mean, the problem is systemic, right? We really want to take huge social problems and point fingers and say, okay, this is the explanation. But the thing is, like, it's a really big and complicated problem, and we can't code our way out of it. One of the things you do when you are solving problems with code is you get very reductivist, right? You say, okay, I'm going to take this difficult thing, I'm going to identify the specific pain points, and then I'm going to write code against those pain points, and that's going to be my intervention, which is a totally legitimate and useful way to write code in order to solve a particular problem. It's just that social problems like racism, sexism, ableism, these are such long-standing and centuries-old problems that we can't eliminate them just by narrowing it down to a couple of pain points and then write a code against it, right? It took us centuries to get into this pickle, and it's going to take a pretty long time, as well as some robust effort by every member of society in order to get out of the pickle.
Yeah, I like how you put it, getting into the pickle. Were we ever out of the pickle? I mean, you say it took centuries to get into it. Was there a moment in history where the pickle, as you put it, didn't exist?
I mean, we have never lived in a perfect world, to the best of my knowledge. And this is one of the issues with AI, right? So when we think about how we build an AI system or a machine learning system, we build it the same way every time. We take a whole bunch of data and we dump it into the computer and we say, computer, make a model. The computer makes a model. And the model shows the mathematical patterns in the data. And then you can use that model to do all kinds of cool stuff. You can make decisions, you can make predictions, you can generate new text or images or audio, right? And that is how every AI system works, in essence. Now, the reason that the AI systems make some boneheaded decisions is that the data that is being used to train the system is often biased. It contains all of the pre-existing bias of the real world. And so, yes, if we did have a perfect world, we could take data from that perfect world and render it in a mathematical model and then use it to reproduce that perfection. But we do not yet live in a perfect world. We're trying to make it better. We are all doing our best, but it is not yet perfect.
We did a show a few days ago with my friend Keith Teare, the author of the That Was the Week newsletter. He called for more utopian thinking in technology in Silicon Valley. He himself is an investor and a VC. Do you agree with him? Should we be unambiguously utopian? Should we be aiming for the stars, thinking about creating a perfect world through this new technology?
I think that the idea of utopian thinking is delightful and inspiring and also deeply flawed. There's a kind of utopian thinking that is pretty common in the tech world that traces back to the new communitarians of the 1960s. So basically, folks in the 1960s were dropping out, dropping acid, going to communes, living on the communes, being hippies, and then the communes collapsed, right? Because they didn't have they were like, oh, we're going to live outside of government, and that didn't work so well. And they also were pretty bad places to be female. Like if you were a woman on a commune, you ended up barefoot, pregnant, and in the kitchen. That's not fantastic. Communes faltered when people's trust funds ran out. Communes faltered when they got taken over by charismatic leaders, right? So this movement collapsed, but many of the folks in the movement said, oh, well, there's this new world of cyberspace. We are going to take our communitarian values and we're going to implement them in this new world of cyberspace, right? So that's why you have the folks associated with the Whole Earth Catalog.
Stuart Brand, we've done shows on him and with him, quite a character.
So fascinating. Fred Turner has this really amazing book. I think it's called From
Cyberspace to...
Yes, that's the one. This is an amazing book.
Yeah. I always get the title wrong, but it's basically From the Counterculture to Cyberspace.
That's it. I do always get the title wrong. And it's a shame because I recommend this book all the time.
Yeah, we had Turner on many years ago. It's an important argument. So Meredith, if that model's wrong, if we don't want to go the Stuart Brand counterculture route, the kind of new techno left of the 60s, are there political models that technologists should want to emulate in terms of getting closer to a perfect society?
Well, we could look to Black feminist imaginaries. We could look to, Latino feminist imaginaries. There are lots of other paradigms out there. One of the things that I think is really interesting about this whole issue is that when you are writing an algorithm, Cathy O'Neil has said that algorithms are opinions embedded in code. Right. So when you are writing a computer program, you do have to decide, okay, what is the one way that I want this computer program to operate? And generally, when you are the creator of the computer program, you write it so that it is consistent with your own value system. Now, one of the problems we've run into in the world is that there are multiple value systems out there, and yet we're trying to contain everybody's value system within the one value system of the one person or small team of people who are implementing the code, right? So that is just fundamentally impossible to do. So I am enthusiastic about a world where there is room for, 60s inspired utopian thinking. I am excited about a world where there is an Afrofuturist imaginary. I am excited about a world where we, uh, think about indigenous data and indigenous practices and respect those inside the digital world, which is not something that's happening now. And so the world contains multitudes. Like, there are many, many possible ways to be. And yet when you're writing a computer program, it's really about there being one way to be. And so that's where we run into problems.
You quote Kathy O'Neill, another very influential figure in this, who perhaps is suggesting, I'm interpreting your quote from her, and that all technology is really ideology. Should big tech companies be open about that? Should they acknowledge that what they claim is objective or scientific actually represents their values? Jay Rosen, one of your colleagues at NYU, suggests that about journalism. Is journalism in that sense any different from OpenAI or Microsoft? New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, they're all relatively open about how they think about the world. They're not ashamed to recognize that they are themselves vehicles of ideology. Should tech companies do the same thing?
Well, one of the ideas I read about a lot is the thing I call techno-chauvinism, the idea that technological solutions are superior to others. And what I would argue instead is that we should use the right tool for the task. Sometimes the right tool for the task is a computer, and sometimes it's something simple like a book in the hands of a child sitting on a parent's lap. Right? One is not inherently better than the other. And so techno-chauvinism also comes along with this idea that if you use math, right, if you use technology to solve a problem, then it is somehow more objective, more unbiased, more fair, more divorced from the messiness of humanity. And this is not at all true. However, there's a certain prestige to that kind of thinking inside the math world, which then the computer science world inherited, and then big tech, as an offshoot of elite computer science, then also inherited, right? So there's status associated with using technology somehow. We really need to push back on that because technology is pretty mundane nowadays. I mean, we definitely, if you were marketing technology from the 60s through the 80s, you definitely had to pretend that it was something that would elevate you, that would make you more elite because that helped you sell more technology. But now, like, we are past the point of the digital revolution. Like, the digital revolution has happened. Digital stuff is completely ordinary now, and we need to be more realistic about it.
So you wouldn't agree with the conservative critique, the Trumpist critique of big tech, that it's a vehicle for coastal elites, coastal liberals?
As far as I know, everybody uses the same digital technology.
We're speaking with Meredith Broussard, one of technology's great thinkers. Catching up with her. She was on the show 14 months ago. Lots happened in the last 14 months. And I want to thank our friends at Liberties for bringing us great guests like Meredith Broussard. Liberties is a quarterly of culture and politics. It's going to run a short feature on Liberties. And I want to come back in our second half of the show and talk to Meredith about what she's been up to in the last 14 months. So don't go away, anyone. We'll be back in not 14 months, 14 seconds with Meredith Broussard.
The noise, there is nuance, insight. Liberties is not just a journal of ideas. It's a meteor of intelligent substance. It's the place to be for engaged citizens. Politics, opinion, substance. Liberties is a triumph for freedom of thought. A quarterly of urgency, of cultural exploration, of intellectual delight, of immaculate prose. It's invaluable. Subscribe now or find Liberties at your favorite bookseller.
And you can subscribe to Liberties at libertiesjournal.com. We're speaking with Meredith Broussard. Meredith was on the show 14 months ago, back in March of 2023. Much has happened in the last 14 months, Meredith. And you yourself personally have written about some of the stuff that's been happening to you. You were screened by AI. You've written about this. Tell us about this experience.
Well, thank you for asking about that. So one of the chapters in More Than a Glitch is about my breast cancer experience. So I was diagnosed with breast cancer shortly before the pandemic started, and my way of coping with terrible news is over researching. So I read absolutely everything I could get my hands on, and I also read all of the details in my electronic medical record, like even the parts that they never expect you to poke around in. And I found this note in my chart that said, "This mammogram has been read by Dr. So and so and also by an AI." And because I'm an AI researcher, I thought, wait, who wrote the AI? What did the AI find? What kind of bias is embedded in this AI? And then because I had cancer, I kind of forgot about this thing and went on to other stuff. And then so I'm very grateful to the all of the medical professionals who helped me get better. And then once I was a little bit better, I started researching AI. And what I decided to do was I decided to do an experiment, a replication experiment with an N of 1, where I would take my own scans and run them through an open source AI in order to write about the state of the art in AI-based breast cancer detection. Because cancer detection is one of the applications of AI, one of the potential applications of AI that you hear about a lot. And obviously, I am totally on board with anything that helps with early detection, that helps more people get diagnosed, get treated, and anything that saves lives. And so from reading the mainstream media, I had gathered the impression that that cancer diagnostic, that AI that diagnosed breast cancer and other kinds of cancer was right around the corner. And then I actually looked at the dates and I realized that people have been saying, oh, yeah, it's right around the corner for a really long time. And so I did the thing that I often do. I really examined closely the claims that were being made by tech companies, by journalists writing about what the tech company said. And I discovered that while we have made lots and lots of amazing progress in AI-based cancer detection, we are not yet at the point where anybody should expect that AI is going to replace doctors. I would also say that as somebody who has been diagnosed with cancer, I do not at all want that imagined future where you would, get a mammogram and then the AI would read it and say, yes, you have cancer. No, you don't have cancer. I want an actual human being to talk to in that crisis moment. That's one of the things that gets omitted from these kind of fully tech-enabled visions of the future. When we are in crisis, we want other human beings. We want to be cared for and cared about.
You teach, Meredith, at NYU, so you spent a lot of time around younger people. You had an interesting Wall Street Journal piece a few months ago about how AI fake news, nudes are now a frightening reality for teens over the last 14 months. The argument about social media has really exploded. Your NYU colleague, Jonathan Haidt, has a best-selling new book, The Anxious Generation. What's your take on the impact of social media on young people, perhaps mostly younger than the kind of kids you teach at NYU, teenagers in particular? Some people argue that everything changed when it came to teen mental health in about 2012 when social media took off. Are you in the Haidt camp on this? He's had quite a few critics as well.
Well, I'm not a psychologist. I am an AI ethics researcher, and so social media is not entirely my lane. My lane is algorithmic accountability. I would encourage people to have a really skeptical view of the claims that social media companies make. And I also do not co-sign on this future, this imagined future where everybody only relates to each other digitally. I think that we need digital relationships and we need in-person relationships, and one is not inherently better than the other.
Meredith, I hope we can make this more frequent. It won't be another 14 months till I see you again on the show. But
Hope
if
so.
it is, if you do come on the show again, I hope maybe we'll do a live event at some point in the Bay Area. But if you do come on the show, say in a year or 14 or 15 months, sometime in 2025, there's a huge debate now about the regulation, particularly of AI and of companies like OpenAI and Google. What would you like to see done in the next year or two when it comes to regulation and addressing some of the problems of AI? You've suggested earlier that some of the stuff's hype, but some of it's for real. What needs to happen that's doable, that isn't utopian in the near future?
Well, I mean, my utopian vision definitely has to do with me being put in charge of everything, so I can write all of the rules.
I
Right?
can't. I can't help you with that, Meredith. If I
Yeah.
could, I'd put you in charge, but unfortunately, I don't think that's
Barring that, what I would like to see is I would like to see tech companies obeying our existing laws. For a long time, there's been this this idea that because things are happening in cyberspace, they're not subject to terrestrial laws, which is garbage. Uh, and unfortunately, software developers do not know enough about the laws in the domains for which they're developing. And that has led to all kinds of problems. So I think we've made great strides forward with the White House's executive order on AI. I think we are going to see more regulation being put into place in the next couple of years. And I'm also particularly enthusiastic about the blueprint for an AI Bill of Rights out of the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. And that takes human rights as a framework. And the big idea there is that the same human rights that you enjoy in the world should be implemented inside social media systems, algorithmic systems, AI systems, which does not sound very radical. You know, the idea is let's follow the same rules in the digital world that we do in in the real world. But as I said, that has not actually been the case for a really long time, and so to many in the big tech world, it feels really radical. But that's what I'd like to see. I'd like to see tech companies obeying the law.
not a lot to ask. And finally, let's end where we began with Sam Altman and the story about OpenAI's supposed appropriation of Scarlett Johansson's voice. There are going to be a lot of court cases over the next few months. New York Times is suing OpenAI. How important are these cases in terms of these AI companies supposedly stealing images and ideas and videos and photographs from the creative community? How hopeful are you that the law courts will impose some sort of controls over seemingly out of control companies like OpenAI, who seem to just make their own rules as they go along?
Well, I'm pretty angry about OpenAI's use of copyrighted material to train its AI models. My previous book, Artificial Unintelligence: How Computers Misunderstand the World, was taken by OpenAI and used to train its models without my permission, without compensation. So I'm pretty mad about that. Uh, in terms of the Scarlett Johansson issue, have we seen yet the actual name of the person that OpenAI claims was the actor who voiced the?
Yeah, I've read stories that this person was described, but I don't know if we've got the name yet. It might come out by the time this interview is broadcast.
I mean, I think we need the name. We need to see this person. Uh, and we need to make sure it's not a deep fake, because OpenAI does have this technology where you can feed in examples of somebody's voice, and then it makes a synthetic voice that sounds just like it. And we know that OpenAI has done stuff like they developed their Whisper technology in order to scrape YouTube videos and transcribe them, and so they could use them in training their models. So I would really like to see this actual human being who they claim has a voice like Scarlett Johansson's, because they do own some voice deepfake technology. So that's what I'd like to see. And the other thing I'll say about the copyright issues is that copyright is about human creations, right? It's about making new creative works based on human creative works. And what generative AI is doing is it's not humans creating new creative works, it's machines creating new things. And so one of the things that I think we could be doing is we could be looking at it using a factory model and a mineral rights model as opposed to a copyright model, right? So if generative AI is like a machine, we have a precedent for this. Factories take raw materials and transform them using machines into other products. And we do that using, say, minerals that we've mined out of the earth. So what if we think, all right, the generative AI companies are strip mining the internet. What if we use a mineral rights framework and pay creators for the raw material that the generative AI companies are stripping out of our collective information?